Are you seeing signs and you don't know what they mean or who they are from? Or maybe you are wanting to see signs, you're asking for signs, and nothing is coming through. Radio silence. In this video, we are going to talk about signs, symbols from the universe, what they are, how to interpret them, who they are from, and how to make them happen more. And more importantly, we are going to talk about your language with the universe, your language with this other side, and how it differs from somebody over here. Everyone is unique and they're going to receive these symbols and signs in different ways. So welcome. If you are new here, my name is Lauren. I am a psychic development coach. I like to teach people how to use their abilities. And part of understanding our psychic abilities is understanding how those messages come through. So what are signs? In my opinion, signs are messages from the other side. They are coming from a psychic source. You'll often hear me say, God, the universe, loved ones in spirit, your higher self. It's whatever you believe in, but it's divine. It's from this other side. Now there's all sorts of different types of signs that you will see, and we're going to break them down here in a second. But really quick, I want to just differentiate what's the difference between a psychic hit and a sign. Honestly, it's a little fuzzy. I really think that anything you receive from this other side is a psychic hit, a psychic message, a sign from the universe, a sign from somebody that's trying to talk to you. So just know that if I say psychic hit or sign, it's kind of the same thing. I feel like if anything psychic hits, you're usually more aware of, you understand that it's a hit, it's a message is coming through. Because sometimes you will come across signs and it'll just go over your head and you won't even recognize it for what it is. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule for either one. Just know that both of them are receiving messages from the other side. So let's get into types of signs. I want to start with the most common is what I find when people are just opening up their abilities. And these are signs that you see in your physical environment. They are physical, real objects. So think about when you find a penny or when you find a feather and it's out of place and you just intuitively feel whoa, that's weird, that's different. I mean, truly the list could go on here. We could say bubbles, we could say acorns, we could say, guides, give me some more. That's inappropriate. It can be when you go to a thrift store and pull a book off the shelf and find your name in it. That's another story. It can also be billboards, looking up at a billboard and just seeing something that just clicks and feels like a message for you. I also think that for some, you can feel like things are moving in your environment. Your keys fall off of the dresser. Your lights start to flicker. TV or electronics turning on and off when they're not supposed to be. So an example of this, you're thinking about grandpa. Maybe grandpa has passed and all of a sudden you come across a feather. A feather falls in front of your face and it's where the heck did that come from? That could be a sign from the universe. Signs can be anything physical in our environment that gets our attention, that feels out of place, that you just stand there for a minute processing and wondering, is that something more? Now, I would say that often this starts to happen, you start to notice, and then all of a sudden it stops happening. And I will say that, not a hard and fast rule, but for a lot of people, what seems to happen is as they become more aware, it's like those physical, really obvious things come through less. And I, side note, think it's that your guides want you to really hone your abilities, your intuition, so that they don't have to work as hard to get your attention. Again, not a hard and fast rule. I still have physical things appear in my environment all the time. Other signs can be colors. Again, this could be in your literal environment. You're just super drawn to the color of something. You also could see colors, psychically, closing your eyes, seeing shapes, seeing colors. For example, you could be thinking about mom who has passed away and her favorite color was orange. Maybe she always wore orange. And you're talking with somebody over here about your mom and somebody walks in the room and is wearing bright orange. And it feels like, whoa, that's weird, that's not related, but is it? I often also find that when people meditate or dream, they see in color. But colors sticking out to you physically or even psychically can absolutely be a sign. That goes for numbers as well. I find that almost everyone comes to me, they're like, I'm seeing 222, I'm seeing 1111. It's on your microwave, it's on your phone. You see it nonstop. And that is absolutely a way that the universe communicates with us. It's showing us something that's really out of the norm, that it's like, whoa, is that a coincidence? And that's a huge thing with these signs, is sometimes it almost feels like it can't be a coincidence. I think the most common example of this is like whenever your spirit guides are trying to say, hey, we're here, we're around, they might send you the number 444. You might also see signs in nature. This can be shapes in the clouds that look like something. You could be near a body of water and kind of looking at it and feel or see something. This could even be animals like behaving strangely or just like being really weirdly out of place. Like the best example I can think of recently was I saw a black widow in my backyard. Terrifying, one. But two, I never see black widows. Yeah, they're sort of common in Colorado, but not really. And so that was really out of place. And so when I see that, I'm like, is that a sign? Maybe. I also believe that light can actually be signs and messages. Like when the light comes in a certain way, when the light shines through the clouds, or the light has a certain color or a weird shape that it's casting into your room or your home. Like I do believe that those can be signs as well if you're perceptible enough. I think we can also feel super connected to the elements, and signs and symbols can come in that way. Just know signs and messages are not always physical, literal objects. You can see it in your natural environment around you. One of my favorite signs from the universe is also called a synchronicity. Now, synchronicities are when two totally unrelated things seem somehow meaningfully related. Truly, there's no cause and effect there, but it just seems connected somehow. So an example of this, bear with me. Last week, my cat actually went to the vet, felt like something was off, and took him in, and they went to draw his blood. And when they did this, he collapsed. He fainted. He had to be on oxygen pretty much all day. It was super scary, and the vets were just like, we don't know what's going on, if he's gonna pull through, just wanna warn you. So I go home, I have to leave him there for the day, and I separately talk to my husband about what he did with his friends the night before. He went out with some of his guy friends, one of them being an EMT, and they did like the liquid IVs for like hydration. And apparently one of the other guys that was there that night also fainted, kind of had like a reaction to it, and then he decided not to do the IV. And then it reminded me, as I'm in conversation with my husband, that the vet said one of the possible things that it could have been was a vagal response, which is essentially like too much stress, body just kind of faints and has an episode. Don't quote me on that, not a doctor. But in that moment, I took that as a synchronicity. I was like, wow, that happened last night. This happened this morning. That does not seem like a coincidence. And I took it in the moment as comfort that maybe that's what was going on with my kitty. Thankfully, fast forward, Kitty was okay, got back to normal, and the vet said, wow, I think that was just that vagal response. That doesn't normally happen, super weird. So, two things seemingly unrelated, also being related. I'm sure there's better examples out there, like, you are thinking about somebody you haven't seen in a long time, an old friend, and then the next day they send you a message, right? That can also be a synchronicity. Now, another way we can receive signs is actually in conversation. It's almost like somebody saying something that just like resonates with you, like, whoa, that's what I was just saying yesterday. Or even that example with my husband and cat. Like my husband felt compelled to tell me a story, and I could take that as a sign as well. Sometimes you'll talk to your friends or family and they'll just say something and you will feel like, whoa, was that somebody else like speaking through them? I don't know. But absolutely, I think you can receive signs just from like other things that people say. I think that sometimes they can be guided to say something or be unknowingly channeling, and I think that's a way that the universe talks to us. Another example of this is like when my husband and I were trying to name our firstborn son. We were coming up with names and we were kind of stuck on one, and we said, universe, like show us, is there any other options? Is there any other names we should consider? And I think we were at an event and somebody came up to us and said, hi, I work for so-and-so, and the so-and-so was the exact same name that we were going to name our son. And I remember this was like a synchronicity that both of us, we like looked at each other, looked back at this person, and it was just like, whoa. Definitely a huge sign that wanted that name. I also think you can receive signs in your dreams. Some dreams are about very like literal day-to-day things, but I do think that you can get messages from guides, from loved ones in your dreams. I also think you can receive signs through divination tools. I think that's why a lot of people enjoy using tools and seek out tarot cards, pendulums. You're kind of creating a way for the universe to communicate through these tools to you. I also believe that you can receive signs psychically. They can come through your clairs is what I call them. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that in this video, but that is like receiving signs and messages in your mind's eye through thoughts that kind of are put into your head, through feelings. You can feel chills, you can feel somebody touch you. So they're not quite like physical in your surroundings, but they are more those psychic senses. Again, watch my clairs video if you're like, what the heck are those? So those are some types of signs that we see. I feel like I'm missing some, and I'm sure I'm gonna remember as I'm editing. But usually what happens, you get this sign and you're just like, okay, what the heck does it mean? Short answer, it can mean anything. Long answer, this is where we get into understanding the language and the symbolism of how your guides communicate to you, of how your spirit guides, loved ones in spirit, God, universe, whatever you believe, it's how they're communicating that to you. And so this is why I believe that dream books do not work, or looking up what your animal totem is. And I think that's because the universe is constantly communicating in symbolic messages to us. Sometimes they are literal, sometimes they are symbolic, they have like other meanings. I think as humans, we love communicating stories and we love explaining things through images and words and auditory things and touch and all the sensations. We love communicating, you know, what we think and feel in that way. But everybody interprets those differently. Like think about art in the museum. You go look at a piece of art, you're going to interpret it one way versus the person standing next to you who interprets it a completely different way. And we could get into a whole thing about why that is, but I think your upbringing influences it, your economic background, your social background, your race, your gender, your identity. Everyone sees things in a different way. And so that's why I think a book about dreams and what they mean is just not going to connect with everybody. Even like tarot, you know, some people might look up a tarot card and just totally not connect with the meaning of what that is. So an example of this is like colors. You know, what I think the color blue is to me might not be the same as you. Like when I think of blue, I think of calm, I think of ocean, I think serene. I also think of snow and winter for some reason. You might have those same associations, but you might also have completely different ones. Let me know in the comments down below. What does blue mean to you? Now that's just color. Now for most of those signs coming through, I think the easiest way to figure out who it's from and what it means is literally just asking. That's what I tell everyone. When it happens, ask. Pay attention to what was going on in your mind at the time, what was going on in your life. Ask, say, who's this from? What does this mean? And this is where we start to get into like honing your psychic abilities. If you do that, this is going to be easier and easier. But often what I find is that a lot of people struggle a little bit more with the symbolic messages, the more abstract ones that don't really like make sense when they come through. Now, obviously, I still encourage you to use that technique of, hey, what does this mean? Just ask, you know, what does this symbol mean to me? And if you feel like your psychic abilities aren't quite there yet, what I want you to do is just do this simple exercise. And that is, what is the first thing you think of when you think of this? Here's another example. Like, let's say you're interpreting your dreams, right? And you got this symbol of a gun in your dream. You know, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of a gun, right? For some people, that's scary, danger, run, right? For other people, it's safety, it's protection. So as you're picking up signs from the universe, you really have to ask yourself, okay, what does that mean to me? How would I interpret that? Another example, what is the first thing that you think of when I say the number 420? Now, for some of you, you might have absolutely no association with that number, and that's totally okay. Now, others, you might think of 420, marijuana. Now, for me, my guides kind of taught me what 420 should mean for me, in that I was going about day to day, I was having a real crappy week, my car broke down, got stuck, couldn't get groceries, like just everything, shit was hitting the fan and it would not stop. And I was very much in this victim mentality. Woe is me, my life sucks, everything's falling apart, whatever. And I kept seeing 420 everywhere. I saw it on my phone. I saw it on the microwave. I think even somebody like booked a reading with me specifically at 420. I just kept seeing it everywhere. Now I knew this wasn't a message of like smoke some weed, because I've already decided, done with that. It used to give me panic attacks, not for me anymore. But so I asked, I said, guides, you're showing this to me everywhere. What does this mean? And I think I received the answer to this psychically. I also pulled a tarot card, and I think I pulled the victim card in the tarot deck that I was using. And so it was like, oh, bam. Okay, that totally relates to me and my situation right now, because I've been in that energy for this last week. And that makes sense. And so ever since that day, anytime I see 420, it's my guides reminding me, hey, don't get in that victimhood mentality. You're there again, get out of it. So that is my definition of that sign, that symbol. And it's gonna be different for everybody. But I figured it out by talking to my guides, by understanding that language. They were giving me something new that was blank, that I didn't have an association with. And now I have a meaning. So every time I see that, I know, okay, oh, 420 equals victimhood. And again, when you're trying to interpret these more symbolic signs that are coming through, context is super important. So if you're trying to like dive into like a dream that's been reoccurring and you've had it since a kid, you also have to look at, you know, what was going on in your life as a kid in that moment to really understand what that message could be. And on a day-to-day level, you know, you can just pay attention to what's going on as you receive those signs. What were you thinking about? Where were you? Who are you with? That's going to also help to inform you of like what context was surrounding that message. Why did it come in then specifically? What were you doing, feeling, seeing, thinking? And the same thing goes for like, who is this from? Just ask. You might not know right away. It might take some time to figure out who it's from. But I always say just go with your gut, because usually the first person that comes to your mind, first thing, like guide, energy, whatever, you know, you're usually pretty much spot on. You know, that is your intuition talking. But again, it's going to come with experience. Now, the one question I get asked a lot about like interpreting this language, this symbolism that you associate with you and your spiritual team. The question I get asked is like, well, do you use those same associations when you're reading other people? And I think you do. I think it's a lot easier to use your own symbols and language versus trying to learn somebody else's in the middle of a reading, basically. So like, for example, if I see the color blue around somebody, you know, I'm gonna tell them what blue means to me. I'm not gonna just say, oh, you have a blue aura, walk away, bye. You know, I'm gonna make sure I explain what blue means to me. Now, sometimes when I'm reading other people, they will often like have psychic experience, like they'll pick up information like during the reading, and they'll say, oh, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that. I encourage them to go with what they feel like that means. Like, what does that color mean to you? I think even last week I recently read somebody who we were diving into their dream, and I said, okay, well, when you think of this thing that kept showing up in her dream, what do you think of? Because ultimately that's her guides trying to communicate through her dreams to her, and they're using her language. So really it's going to depend on like who the message was received by, because that's the person that you want to use like their language. So if I'm reading somebody and I'm seeing, you know, some of these symbols that we talked about, like a gun or a color or a number, I'm going to use my association with it and explain what it means. Versus, you know, try to ask them, oh, well, what does blue mean to you? Because they might not know, you know? So it's your language, it's your psychic ability. You want to go through what you've established with your guides. So if you feel like you're kind of struggling with this, like you're not really sure if it's literal or if it's symbolic or who it's from, or even like what the message exactly is, just know that I go over these in my psychic development courses much more in depth, and I give you some exercises to like work through this. So hopefully now you have an understanding of how some of these signs might come through and how you might interpret them. And that brings me to my last point, which is like, how do you get them to happen more? I know that a lot of us, once we start experiencing them, it's like we want more. We want the universe to communicate with us, and that's totally fair. And I'm always going to say, two things for this. One, to expect it. Expect those signs to come through. Move about your day, move about your life as if you are constantly receiving signs from the universe. Don't see anything as a coincidence. I mean, obviously, like, yes, please do practice a healthy skepticism, but for the most part, try to see the symbolism, try to see the synchronicities in things, try to see if there are any signs that could be coming through. Now, you can do this in one of two ways. You can either ask for your guides to provide you with these kind of symbols, or you can tell them what symbols you want to use. So we can ask for signs, we can sit, we can wait and see what they end up giving us, like this whole 420 thing that I gave you an example for. Or you can say, no, I want you to use this. Like, guides, anytime I'm going in the wrong direction, can you please show me a penguin or something? Like, I don't know. Pick something that's not like too specific, but also something that's not like too vague. Like, you don't want to see it often in your normal day-to-day environment, but it has to be something that, like, when you do see it, you're like, oh wow, okay, no, that is kind of rare. Like, I wouldn't normally have seen that. So that's the first thing we can do. We can basically ask our guides to either give us something, give us a sign, give us a symbol, or we can give it to them and say, hey, use this. And you often find me coaching that, you know, when you're doing a reading, you can say, hey guides, communicate this symbol to me when this person is passed or when they're still living, or give me a symbol for something that represents like good, go for this, or no, bad, don't go for this. Now, the second way we can make these signs and symbols come through and come through fast is by psychically asking. This is the portion of what I was talking about earlier of like using your clairs, asking for a sign, a symbol, a direct message right here, right now. I'm not gonna wait the whole week to figure it out. Now, again, that's where we get into like you can use divination tools. I'm obviously a huge advocate of using your psychic abilities, using your clairs to answer those questions, but I'm a huge advocate for understanding your psychic abilities, learning how to receive those messages, figuring out how to get them to come through and more often and more accurate and when you want them to. And this comes down to like your psychic clairs. It's asking a question. Guys, what should I do? What do you think about this? Mom, spirit, like loved one in spirit, come through, talk to me. And then, you know, waiting for that answer and receiving that message psychically. I think so often when we think of signs, we think of something physical. But if I told you that there's a way to connect and receive these messages psychically, you know, wouldn't you want to hone that? And again, that's why I think developing those abilities is going to be faster, more accurate, and you're going to be able to control who you're talking to as well. Now, when it comes to making these signs happen more often, if you're still struggling, I would look into first like removing blocks to your psychic ability, because maybe they're happening and you're just not noticing, or maybe your intuition is kind of blocked. If you're struggling with that, I do have a YouTube video here on that, but I also have a whole section in my courses about how to remove blocks, because that's a big part of understanding your psychic abilities. Now, if you really want to get some practice on understanding like what your language looks like what symbolism your guides use, I really think the most important thing you can do is just practice. Practice reading yourself, practice reading other people. Our Patreon is like a really great place to do that. We have once a month, we have a group that gets together. We practice reading each other virtually. It's a great place to like flex those skills. So I hope from this video, you've not only learned what those signs look like, but how to make them happen more often and how to interpret them. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. If you found this video helpful, give it a like, and I will see you in my next one. Alrighty, bye.